Hey, you're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
And as usual, I'm still your co host, Mark.
I'm your host, Josh, free of monsters. Thank you, Sam. And on this one, we're talking about It Lives Inside, a movie that made it's currently on its festival run, will be out in theaters later this year, courtesy of Neon, but it is a part of our coverage of this year's Fantasia Fest, and it is our conclusion to this year's Fantasia Fest. Fantasia Fest.
Fantasia Fest.
Yes.
Fantasia.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Having some difficulties there, weren't you?
just a little bit, every once in a while it comes in. You guys can check out interviews. We've had interviews with some filmmakers up on our YouTube page as well as our official site. And then we've talked about some really great films this year. Uh, you know, so but I'm curious, where does this one land for you? So, what are your general thoughts on It Lives Inside?
So we're doing spoiler free right now, right?
Yes.
I feel like it's an interesting movie that deals with some interesting mythology, very similar to the way I believe it was the Unborn kind of introduced everybody to the Die Book. This does something similar with a different culture. So it's one of those. That's kind of what drew me to it. Why I thought it looked interesting, and one of the ones I was looking forward to from Fantasia was because mainly of that. It was not something we see normally in the horror we get to watch on a regular basis.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I really love about the medium of film is the ability to step into other cultures and other belief systems and other religions that this one does really well and like kind of culture period. I think that this film really embraces that. Uh, I think it's a really, for me, I thought it was a really satisfying coming of age story for our lead character Sam in this one. But it has some like really interesting moments, but I feel like it's an interesting take on the possession subgenre, but also at the same time, like I felt like there were definitely lulls in this movie that I feel like had this like had there been maybe like a few minutes like trimmed here and there from certain sequences, uh this movie would have been a lot stronger.
I don't think it was a possession movie, but more of a paranormal creature feature. Something along the lines of Boogeyman that just came out not long ago.
That's fair. I mean, I took it kind of as a possession movie, um to a certain extent. Like it's a little bit of both. Um yeah,
Okay. I don't see the possession aspect of it.
we'll talk about it in
Okay.
spoilers. Uh, but I also think this movie looks really beautiful. Like I liked the red hue of the movie. I thought that it looked hauntingly beautiful. And I don't know, I thought the acting was strong. I thought the emotion of it was strong. It had a good atmosphere about it, but
Had
there
some
was
fun
something,
kills.
it has some fun kills. There are it for as much as it had
It had
strength
just
with
as
it.
much weak.
Yeah. So like that's kind of like where it kind of like faults for me, unfortunately.
So one of my issues with it is that I've watched a lot of Asian horror
Hmm.
and it deals a lot with atmosphere and folklore and superstition. They talk about it in this, but it plays out like an American horror, not like an Asian horror.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
So it was kind of the American take on Asian horror, almost, is what it seemed like to me.
That's fascinating. So like I have not seen as much Asian horror as you. And I've seen like the staples of the genre like Ringu and I am not I can't remember what the Grudge is. Juin,
Ju-on, Ju-on.
Juwan. Like those are like the
Jap
two like I've seen
Japanese
like
grudges are fantastic.
they are so good and like so like I've seen like yeah, I've seen like J horror here and there. Um, but I haven't like
Well,
really dove
well,
in deeply to
not
them.
even not even just J horror, but Asian horror as a whole. Like Malaysia's got a bunch of stuff coming out right now from a couple directors. They recently did remake of Satan's Slaves, and it's the same guy that did I think it's called Impetigru, something like that.
Category, yeah,
And
it's on
yeah,
Shutter.
a lot of that Asian horror that falls in that specific category, it's just so much more suspenseful and does more to build creep factor than just about anything you'll see in American horror as a whole.
S-
Um,
So,
even even the medium, which is on Shutter right now,
mm,
is part of that genre. And it also falls in the found footage, but it's, and I know you're not a big fan of found footage, but it's one I think you'd like because of the way it builds tension and suspense, and it's everything that the influence of this movie should have shown, but fell to the American basics.
so I think partially because of that, I think it's because so the filmmakers behind this are Bashal Dutta and Ashish Mahad. Both of them seem to have backgrounds in mostly American productions, according to their IMDb pages, but it doesn't actually um talk about where they're technically from, whether or not they were, spent most of their lives in the States or, migrated, whatever.
Well, if
Um,
most of their production is done in American stuff, then they either
sure,
had a studio telling them it had to be that way, or they wrote it the way they knew.
sure. And so like I definitely think that like influence of that could be something, but from someone that like doesn't have a lot of that like Asian horror background or, that knowledge, I think for me some of this stuff really some of it worked really well, but by the end of it, it felt like it was missing something, and like I couldn't quite put my finger on like what it was missing because it seemed to like check all the necessary boxes that I wanted it to check, but it didn't quite leave an impression the way that like movies like Ring You or Ju-on left or like Train to Busan, like it didn't quite hit as deep as either any of those films.
The way it plays out, it almost feels like the original Insidious
And see,
without the astral plane.
so when it comes to the Insidious movies, I actually think that the second Insidious is stronger than the first Insidious. Like,
Well, in the way that they're searching for the boy, it's a very similar story,
sure.
except instead of having to go to the astral plane, it's trying to, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very similar style story in the way it's
it
done.
is. So I really am itching to dive into spoilers for this movie. So on the Rorschach rating scale, 0 to 5, what would you give this movie?
Probably three, right there in the middle somewhere. It's better than a lot of stuff I've watched. It was entertaining, but it was just lacking enough to not make it great or good or something I would seek out for in the future to watch again.
Yeah, I am like I'm right there with you. Like I'm struggling between like a 3 and a 3.5, but I think I'm gonna end up at a 3. I think for me, I think this movie looks really beautiful, but that beauty feels kind of really superficial because of how empty it feels in certain portions of this movie. Like this movie has like opportunity to really allow like the emotional component to like really shine through, and it doesn't ever seem to hit the emotional aspect of it until like the third act.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the same style movie done better.
Sure.
Even though The Unborn was an American movie, I think it did a better job dealing with a Jewish demon and mythology with the die book. And to a point that people know what a die buck and die book box is and all that stuff. This deals with I forgot the name of the actual creature, but it's from um Indian I think Hindi mythology or folklore or something like that. And the creature itself, when they actually show it, just kind of reminded me of a rehash of Pumpkinhead. And
A little bit.
the way they presented the monster was just like, oh, I see they watched The Boogeyman a few months ago. Maybe they were made side by side in the same studio. So
All right.
it
Well,
there was just nothing really to stand out, and it should have been able to with what they were using for background.
yeah, I agree, and we'll jump into it. So if you guys haven't seen, this is the end of our Fantasia Fest coverage. So we're gonna jump into the spoilers right now.
You already
Uh,
said spoilers.
I did, but I'm gonna reemphasize it. This movie opens up nationwide September 22nd, 2023 from Neon. We're gonna release this full thing, re-release it on September 22nd so that you guys can go check it out. But support indie cinema and indie horror and indie film like It Lives Inside. So hit pause, come back because we're gonna spoil this movie.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Um, yeah. So I think I see what you're saying. Like, all right. So just jumping in, I see what you're saying about this being not quite a possession film. I think it ends up being a possession film by the end, but it very much is that paranormal movie. And I think this movie, for as little as bad as I can say about this movie succeeds where I feel Smile last year failed.
I didn't think Smile was bad. I didn't think this was bad, but I don't think either was great. They had little aspects to them that reminded me a lot of It Follows too. There was little things in them that reminded me of a lot of different movies.
So
And Yeah, good.
I was gonna say for me, like the reason that I bring up Smile, and I will just say this right up front so I can just get it out there and just get it over with, pull it off like a band-aid, is Smile had like was played like a psychological thriller where you weren't really sure if there was a monster there or not. And then they showed the monster in all of its glory in the final, like full on showed it in the final act, climax of that movie. And here you kind of get like glimpses of the monster, but it's like played for like shadows. So like when she like the moment where she like wakes up from the dream and like she's looking in her closet, you can see the monster's eyes, turns on the light, monster's not there anymore. Turns it off, you see the lights again. Like the way that they like had the camera angled or would like not quite show you the monster. Like I really liked how they committed to that. Like even in the climax, you don't really ever see the monster fully. And I think
Well, they,
that's one of the biggest strengths of this movie.
and they did that a lot in the Boogeyman too. You didn't really quite see it until the very end.
Yeah, but in Boogeyman, you did see it, whereas in this one, you only still see like the shadows, like the way that it's like lit. You can tell that it kind of looks like a reptilian monster, but it's not quite like out. It's not quite 100% there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little weird looking.
It like I think because it was weird and because they like restrained themselves from like diving in, really allowed the monster aspect of like the character design to be more effective in that way.
Well, I think when you look at the original Predator, part of what made the original Predator so effective is you got to explore that monster as part of it hunting the military crew, Schwarzenegger's people. This one, you get told a little bit at one point in the movie once they're figuring out what's going on, and that's all you really get. And then you see it kill a couple people and go after somebody else. You don't there's no real exploration of the creature. Like I mentioned Pumpkinhead earlier, you get I think like most of the movie is about the background of Pumpkinhead pretty much. Freddy, you get the background of Freddy in the original one. You get the background of Jason and you explore the characters. This one it's there.
To quote John Carpenter, that is what makes it scarier, though. I think that's really what makes it work a lot better. When we did, that Patreon episode a couple years ago, putting the two Halloweens against each other between 78 and 2007, like one of the things that like is one of the things that I will go on a hill dying for is the 1978 works better because there's no reason for the motivation. There's no background to that character. And so it's a lot more like ominous. And they try to in the finale of this film try to establish it, but like I think what makes it more effective is the fact that like there's not a whole lot that's like actually known about the monster, the demon in this case, which I think if I remember correctly, his name is Bashir. I'm
Something
probably
like that.
mispronouncing that. It's like it's B something, but he's basically a demon that feasts on like misery of others.
Yeah, and keep it um trapped in a vessel of some sort. Where they show it in the beginning, it's trapped in a glass jar and trying to get out. And I think they actually showed the glass jar crack at one point, just before the girl drops in a piece of meat.
Yeah, which I want to say that like in terms of like as much as like this movie is just kind of so like I thought this movie had a great opening. The opening to this movie was really strong.
Yeah, I mean, it did have some good aspects to it. It just didn't have anything great to it.
Yeah.
That's all.
And it's one of those things that like, you know, I was watching this. One of my favorite films of this year has so far is not a horror film, but it's a great little action comedy called Polite Society,
We
and it's
watched
a
that just the other week.
dude, it's so good.
Yeah, it was great.
And it's one of those movies that like it explores kind of the same some of the same like cultural aspects as this movie. And when this movie got done, I wanted to watch that movie so bad because like that movie embraces the cultural elements of like women in Hindu culture and their expectations a lot better than this one did, I think.
Yeah, this one didn't do, and that was another thing. It didn't really do a lot to explore the culture at all.
Like, yeah, that's one of the things that as a viewer, it's one of the things that I really like about watching movies from like other countries is I want to better understand how the rest of the world operates because I have a Western view, but not every movie that is set to celluloid is going to have that same viewpoint. And I want to see and experience that. And that just kind of felt like a missed opportunity within this movie because, like you said, like there's a lot of like Asian horror ideas here, but the way they're executed feel very Western.
Yeah, and lacking. They're not lacking what makes it part of that culture, or they were lacking it, what makes it part of that culture. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I do. Well, like one of the things too that like I'm curious if like if you can shed some light on. There is this like switching gears here. There's this like I guess it's like a more modern trope that's within horror where the camera angle will like tilt like just like 45 degrees and like kind of like take you on a ride. And there are like when they get to the kid who commits suicide in this movie, when they get to his house, I think his name is Kieran, but when they get to Kieran's house, like they're going outside, like they do that, where it's just kind of like this, like you look like you're lost, like you don't remember what you're talking about.
I I don't remember any. How do I not remember somebody killing themselves in this movie?
It's done off screen, but it's when her and Russ go back to the house to investigate, and they discover that painting. Do you remember what I'm
Yeah,
talking about now?
yeah, I know that scene. Okay,
But
and
like
they
this thing
is
that
it
like
okay? Good.
the thing that
Sorry.
I'm talking about specifically is like this new trend in horror where camera angles are like just tilting them are like coming towards the audience, but then there's like this like 45 to 90-degree turn and it just keeps continuing and it just
Who
why is
knows?
this a thing?
It was probably in one or two movies that were super successful, and now they all do it.
Like I can understand like Evil Dead Rise doing it because like Evil Dead like kind of like popularized it. But like it just this just kind of seems like this movie from like a technical standpoint just seems like such an odd choice to do that with.
Hmm. I mean, nothing really. As much as I hate to say it, there was a lot of generic in this movie. And you're
That's fair.
talking about it being a modern trend in horror that you notice a lot. It really doesn't surprise me at all.
I don't know. Um, one of the things that like when you talk about like mental health of this, I think this is going to be a shortened episode. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say about the movie. It's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie. It's good for a watch. Some people love it, some people hate it. It'll entertain for a watch or two, but it's just there's not much to say. It's just a stereotypical Western uh creature feature with some Hindi background in it.
yeah, it misses out. It misses its mark
Yeah.
on being a true standout. Like I think, we brought up Polite Society earlier. One of the reasons that that stands out as one of the best comedies of this year was because it was absurd because it didn't take itself too seriously, but it really embraced like the culture of its cast and the setting, like it really like expanded its like full potential. And this one, it just doesn't feel like they do that at all.
And even if you go back further to Bend It Like Beckham, they really kind of explore the Indian family in England, um, and how the girls were supposed to be a certain way according to the traditions of the family. But this just, I don't. It just didn't have anything to really show any of that.
No, it didn't. And yeah, so but when you talk about like one of the things that I do appreciate this move with this movie is some of the mental health themes that it has woven throughout it. And so just for context, like in the movie, there is this demon that is basically passed from, I guess like the best way to put it would be like vessel to vessel is how they put it.
It's so it kills until it's trapped. And at a certain point, they talk about a vessel to trap it in in India could have been a Swami.
Okay, so wait, with that is said, there is the opening sequence is the kind of the original person that occupies it is a gentleman named uh Kieran or Karen, however you want it, Karen Haran, I don't know how to say that. I don't
Now,
know.
now, was he in possession of the jar, or did he originally possess the monster? Or
He
did they
originally
say?
they did not say. So then it becomes Tamira's responsibility with the jar when once the credits roll and it kind of comes back into present day, and then Sam essentially gets it. But so like before that, there's a like the whole sequence is like the whole subtext of this is like stresses the importance of like asking for help. There's a moment in here where Joyce, who is the teacher over all of these students, says, you know, you guys used to be close, like, she means like a lot. You should you should like ask her for help, ask her if she needs help. And Sam says, she's a big girl. If she needs help, she can ask. And that's not always the case. I think asking for help is a lot harder than some people either realize or want to admit when it comes to seeking the counsel of community or friends or family or seeking out a therapist, as well.
Well, part of the issues with asking with help is if you're depressed, a lot of people feel like they're just a burden.
Yeah.
If they're asking for help, I don't want to bother you with my issues, kind of thing. Um, you have some people that are just stubborn and they're my issues to deal with. And then you run into the thought of who's going to believe me, anyways.
Yeah, that's one of the things that like um you know for we've been producing content now for since 2016, and Victims and Villains has been constantly having these conversations through podcasts and events. And um I've only recently dove into actual therapy because I thought a lot of exactly like, I don't want to be someone's burden. I don't think that, I'm worth the time and attention it takes to kind of get over A, B, and C that are currently causing me these issues. And one of the things that we talked about before we started recording is, and I think you mentioned it also too, is the fact that like not everyone's going to believe you. And, for as progressive as we've gotten here in 2023, if you say that you need help when it comes to mental health, not everyone is going to believe you because we still don't 100% believe everything that we can't see. And you can't see something like anxiety or depression or suicidal tendencies, because we know how to dress them up, but B, we also aren't equipped or really trained to also know and understand the warning signs of those things either.
And you also have some people that will, and I know people that have done this, will use those things as leverage to their advantage to get oh, I'm this, you need to treat me this way. I've known people that have done that who got uh, autism diagnoses. They turned around and used it to do whatever they wanted. Not saying everybody does that because that would be wrong, but some people do that. And a lot of people now just, it's caused with the way things are and way things are presented. It causes a lot of people to question the validity of a lot of the claims and this is happening kind of thing. And then you run into a lot of guys are actually looked down upon for admitting that they need help. And they get made fun of for being a weak man because they've asked for help for mental issues.
Because one of the most frustrating things about being a man in modern times is that like we're we're several decades removed from that notion and that conversation of suck it up, it'll be okay. Um, you know, bottle it up kind of mentality of men not talking about them, but yet that societal impact has woven itself into our consciousness. So like I think even subconsciously we think that like as men that we are a burden because of being taught that ideology at a young age. Like I think that's part of the reason that like I felt for years that like I didn't have to go to therapy, or that like therapy wasn't an option for me, was because like I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be someone's issue or someone's problem. But one of the things that I've learned here recently is the importance of self-care and self-love and understanding that it's okay not to be okay.
And one of the things I look at is I don't talk about a lot of things because one, they're my issues and I got to figure out how to deal with my shit. But the other is if I tell somebody what's going on or what's wrong, who's going to use it against me later as ammo?
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression, and you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Another downside of how we use mental health and mental health and mental health issues should never be used as ammunition in any way, shape, or form. But we live in a cancel culture society now where that just kind of seems to be the normal facet. So you're also left with this new problem of really having to choose who you can like actually open up to and like communicate with because of that as a possible repercussion.
Yeah, and you even see in the news off and on, even like therapists and psychologists are coming forward and using things clients have told them as ammo because some big case may have come up or something hit the news and they knew about it. So you even get into how well can you trust a professional to deal with your issues.
Now, I don't want to go on like the narrative of like saying that like, therapy is bad or that counseling
I
isn't
didn't
good.
say that. I
I
just said
didn't, but I'm like starting to like gear. I'm like, someone might be listening to this right now and like be on the fence about therapy or counseling or opening up with others. Like I think it's one of those things that you really like have to. It takes finagling and it takes a routine of practice with a who you can trust, and B also understanding and knowing that like not every therapist that you get in front of or not every resource is going to fit your circumstances and your situations. So it's about finding what works for you.
yeah. I mean, I had bad experience with it. So that's part of what I mean. I'm a skeptical of everybody and everything anyways,
It's true.
but
I can attest.
uh, yeah, it's that's just how it is. But I mean, I had one, you need medication, and I told him what was going on, and oh well, if you don't take these medications I've given you, you're not going to have a girlfriend within this many weeks. You're going to lose your job within this many weeks, and just started telling me everything I was going to do wrong if I didn't take exactly what she gave.
Well, I
And
think what
it turned me into a subservient zombie. People go do this, okay. And I mean, you know how sarcastic I am and how much
I
I
do.
joke, and I could not do it. The thought processes weren't firing to be that way, and I hated it. And this
I,
doctor would not allow me to come off drugs, and I just had to quit going and do it myself.
I think it's one of the things too that like kind of sucks because it definitely does um sometimes um I think it's one of those things that definitely does sometimes happen is that you have therapists that only or psychologists that I guess is more the term because they're the ones that write the prescriptions, but you have like professionals that are essentially like just writing prescriptions instead of actually addressing the issues. And so that you have a whole another set of problems where you come back to how Tamira feels in this movie to where she feels like a burden. And, so when you get into that mentality of being a burden, chances of you actually asking for help are very low.
Oh,
Very low.
when she finally asked for help, she's almost scolded for it and put down for it,
Yeah.
which leads to the entire events of the entire movie.
Yeah, and I mean even like you see that later with like Sam to where like she goes to Joyce for help and then kind of like starts to walk back and Joyce says, "You came to me for help, so let me help you." And it's one of those things too that I think it goes back to this idea that we've been saying is that like it's okay to ask for help, but understand that like when you ask for help sometimes is that it might be this journey of asking different sources for help to really see what you know works best for your mental health and your mental health journey.
Yeah. And for me, it comes down to watching people and how they react.
Hmm.
If it's somebody that I see react certain ways, I'm not going to talk to you about certain things. And not everybody has that observational skill or thought, or maybe I'm just fucking paranoid. But which there's a good chance. But the aliens are not taking over the world, I swear. Uh,
Not yet.
But you get what I'm saying. Just because you ask one person that gives you a hard time doesn't mean that everybody's going to be that way.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too that like for me, like I have like a very like small group of people that I like really am vulnerable with, that like I pour myself out there with, and that number is probably like number I can count on like one hand. But I'm like really vulnerable here on the podcast as well because I believe in the importance of you know being transparent about your mental health and like where you're going through, because it's part part of the journey of bringing that conversation together, is that helping people realize that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, yeah, the end of this movie also too like has like the way that it ends is Sam essentially like becomes the vessel herself.
Yeah.
Um, and
Which they kind of
yeah,
hinted at the beginning of the movie, or about halfway through the movie. Sorry, when they talk about the swamis would act as vessels for this creature to contain him.
yeah,
So they
like
they hinted at how the movie was going to end, like a third of the way into the movie,
that's fair. I'm not
and
even gonna fight you on that.
I hate that, John. I hate that when they tell you at the beginning of the movie or first quarter of the movie how it's going to end.
Yeah, but like I mean, you also like inherit like all of the memories with that as well. So like you really have uh all of like the trauma and everything that like this demon has seen. Like now Sam has to live with that knowledge. And they kind of play it off as like a happy like ending. But you gotta believe that like I mean inheriting someone else's trauma is no walk in the park, and it's the furthest thing from fun you can be.
I mean, with the way it ends, they zoom out and they show what's her name, the main character, Sam.
Sam.
Yeah, they show her go from kind of joking and talking to Tamara to
Tamira.
Tamira. Yeah, I'm horrible with names. I don't remember names. You can't pronounce them most of the time, so it fits. But yeah, she walks away, and as she walks away, as Tamira walks away, you see Sam kind of, her face kind of drops and tear rolls down her cheek, and
Yeah.
you can see struggling with having to contain the thing.
Which is a great ending to this. But I also think that like, I think it's just a great ending, and it's like it speaks volumes to like going back to that whole concept of like asking for help and kind of like the consequences of like living inside, because like that teardrop shot to me almost feels like the equivalent of like someone asking you like, "Oh, how are you doing?" and your answer is like, "I'm good, I'm fine." Like nobody it like, cultural like societies like want to hear like, "Oh man, like I just lost my job. My wife left me, or my husband's divorcing me, or my partner broke up with me, or someone cheated on me, or I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, I'm suicidal." Like nobody really wants to um that's not
No one
something that
wants to
anybody
hear it.
wants to hear. Exactly.
Hmm.
And so I think that doubles down on this concept of the stigma surrounding mental health, is because we don't like to feel uncomfortable, and subjects like that like tend to make us feel uncomfortable. So you just are kind of left like Sam at the end of this movie, and we're just kind of taught to bottle it up and
To
let that single
smile and
teardrop. Yep.
to grin and bear it.
So unfortunately. But if you or someone you know is struggling, there are links in the description right now for our mental health resource library. But Mark, where can we find you online?
I just paint miniatures and junk, and we'll probably be posting some stuff soon now that I'm settled in and actually started really painting again this past like week or so. Titanium Juggernaut painting on Instagram.
I just need you to like make like business cards or stickers, and like you can have like a QR code or something like where it has like your link to your Instagram, and it just says Mark, I paint miniatures and junk.
Yeah, you like how I explain that?
For some reason, I see it as like one of those like baby on board signs, like that hang in windows. Like I just need you to do like Mark.
That's
I paint
that's
miniatures and stuff.
that's my slogan. I paint miniatures and junk.
You guys can find me. I'm on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can follow us, Bizgazing, wherever you guys get your podcast from, and hit that subscribe button, leave a review. It helps more others find the show. But you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon, as well as YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. So until next time, make sure that you guys go check out the rest of our Fantasia Fest coverage. So next time, remember that the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.